When we talk about now about the future, we talk about crisis. That is something which is unfortunately part of what we are in now. If someone knows some Chinese, that's a very interesting word, which is Wei Ji, which is a time of danger and a time of opportunity. That is a bit what I experience. And I'm Italian. I'm from L'Aquila, which has been hit by an earthquake 11 years ago. So I've seen what the danger of what would happen, and after people survived, then became something different later in a VUCA situation, given by a destroyed city, but also an opportunity to grow. So we know very well about the danger. We have all these elements about the quarantine, all the things, but we don't know that much about the opportunity. And Sujaya started in her first webinar last week, just start analyzing what are the critical factors that we should analyze, or what can I do now? And probably analysis that should be done at the beginning to see what are the options is probably the best first step to go. Fragile or agile. So we have VUCA, we have volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, but we can transform into vision, understanding, clarity, and agility, which is also VUCA. Let's see step by step how this remote leadership that we are all performing now, and probably we have to do it for a while, is about the how. It's not about the why. But unfortunately, there are lots of hows and are changing fast. So we have the same goals as usual, but we have to dominate technological tools and lead the way to the others, probably in a very complete different settings, as you have seen today, with all these webinars, artists contributing, and the world which is changing in a different way. So the first point, the V, the volatility. Instead, we are going to focus on a vision of volatility. This first element and all the other three, will consider the Aristotle, the Nicomachean ethics. Many times, like 2000 years ago, Aristotle worked on a triangle, which is the triangle to form the skills. It's a triangle where you have three Greek words, episteme, techne, and phronesis. Experience, knowledge, and attitude. You always need these three elements to build a skill. So today, to start facing our volatility, this huge rate of change, we need to envision. We need to have the ability of envisioning. And of course, if we consider a much more complex world where you have knowledge and experience, you have to consider some other strategic and technological elements. But today, we are only focusing on the attitude here, on the emotional part that affects our decisions. And the two elements we need to know about envisioning is adaptability and communication. Let's see how this works. A French writer, Marcel Proust, was talking about how the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. So when we see about this vision and we consider this adaptability and communication, we have to have the idea of what is happening in the future. This is a book that probably you know the writer, Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote Sapiens and Homo Deus, and now has written this book for the 21st century and the classes. So we have, and we will see later on the complexity part, that we have so many elements that a very simple question like, if we are talking about artificial intelligence and we ask a robot to solve cancer, the first proposal, if we don't give any other context and other elements, that would be to kill all the humans, because that could be a way to solve cancer. But unfortunately, it's not what we are looking for. When we consider this technology, the speed of what is happening, we consider our adaptability and communication, we can think about how fast all this information we are flowing. Imagine this study that has been done that could evaluate the length of Thanksgiving dinner in US. Because of the information we share online, the researcher knew who was Democrat, who was Republican in the dinner, and how long were the dinner lasting if there were mixed groups at the dinner. And the results was that when dinners were mixed, dinners were lasting less. So we have all this huge amount of information, and if you want to have a test on this of how much information you are giving away, if you ever done the Big 5 test and you want to have a vision of yourself, probably normally you have to do lots of tests. But now if you go on this website, applymagicsauce.com, you will get a test just by giving access to your social networks. And I don't use Facebook and Instagram. I only use Twitter and LinkedIn, and only for professional work. But look at this. In just giving access, the Apply Magic Sauce gave me 3 answers correct out of 5. So if you want to know yourself, you want to have a vision, you can have the data. Data are the new oil. I worked many years in Telefonica, and I had the luck to work with the board of Telefonica, the 5th telco company in the world. I was working here I used to run with the CEO of Telefonica, José María Álvarez Payete. And we are talking about all this data and how all these data are affecting us. But we don't know actually what that means in long term, this vision, this adaptability that we need to have, that is about what? We didn't know that cigarettes were bad many years ago. And actually there were doctors who were advertising them, saying that they were kind of throat protection. But now we have another danger, which is internet. If we see all this study where people start using internet and then they cannot stop, like this one, we get into a society which, after centuries of being in scarcity, self-love, and obedience, has passed now into abundance, narcissism, and performance, has this Korean philosopher Byung-Chul Han. So all this adaptability that we need to know, despite we have so much abundance, is something which is not really helping very, very easily. The Nobel Prize laureate Daniel Kahneman divided a group of people into those who are memory-based and those who are experience-based. For example, imagine I have the power to invite all of you attending this webinar for holidays. You just ask me and I will pay for the holidays that you wish. Imagine where you want to go. Just have this quick idea. But then I commit with my promise, but only one condition, that you will drink something that will make you forget your holiday. So once you leave your house and once you are back, all the in between, you will forget. No picture, no videos, nothing. Would the holiday change? Probably for some of you, yes. Why? Because we are memory, majority of us So let's continue. I was telling you, when you have to consider the different options and you think about adaptability and communication, when you have to survive the vision elements of the volatility of a VUCA thing, there is always this kind of question where you are in a storm no day and you are driving your two-seated sports car and you pass in front of a bus stop where there is an elderly lady collapsing, there is a friend who saved your life, and there is a woman of your life. What do? Many people start considering all the options by me being in the car, while instead the solution is that I leave the car to my best friend who will drive the old lady to the hospital, and I will stay with the woman of my life. So very often we have to go through a different level. With this COVID, we are seeing how the business is changing. We are seeing how, thanks to technology, thanks to the digitalization, many companies like Nike start selling more home sport online. Li Qingchuan, which is a company from China of cosmetics, start using WeChat to start delivering the cosmetics and create a campaign. Bimber Distillery is not offering, of course, presential tasting kit for whiskey, but is sending them home. So you can have your own tasting kit from home. People are adapting. We have seen this when Adobe went from the $2,500 package of Photoshop to the $50 per month. The order was burn the boats, was where people were afraid they could not adapt, and there was a clear communication of what to do. The message was burn the boats. The communication and the adaptability, MasterCard, is another example of how they went from storytelling to story making. They start using, instead of a communication strategy, a communication platform. So when we consider our vision takeaways, when we consider these first elements of the VUCA, the volatility, and instead we transform into an ability of envisioning, we of course we use technology. Of course, we have to consider how we talk to people too, to understand the challenge and how we communicate with the people. We need to predict and try to see what the competitors are going to do. But what is important is to adapt our offer, is adapt to our customers, is adapt to their needs. And if we don't adapt and we don't consider that we have to burn the boats behind us, it will be very, very difficult to tell the future and make the story for your people, because that's the only way you can overcome volatility in this period.
Giulio, do you want to share your screen again? Because we lost you in between, so now we can't see your slides. So maybe you want to share your screen again.
I didn't realize that. I was talking. Sorry about this, of course. Yes. So this was the slides about the vision takeaway. And then now from this vision, we will go through understanding the uncertainty. So the second element of the U is about uncertainty, which is about all these multiple key decision factor. Here we want to go into understanding. So what we need is to ask lots of questions about the inquiring. That's why I used the element of a philosopher to understand this part. When we want to overcome the elements of confidence and of the understanding, we need confidence and empathy. Of course, is always about people. If we consider that people have no idea how things are changing, we really have to consider how the competition boundaries have never been defined, and they are even less so now. When we want to think about understanding, we have to see what is happening in the world, to understand what are the next steps, to go within this uncertainty. Yeah, of course, there is an uncertainty because jobs like requiring manual dexterity, memory, management of financial material resources are declining. So all the people who are just working on this are having a problem now. But it's also growing analytical thinking. It's also growing active learning. It's also growing creativity and originality. So when we consider this, our ability to this uncertainty is also offering lots of new options that if we understand, and understand means also understanding where are we, what is our business. And we have lots and lots of examples of company who transform their product in a service. Like Rolls-Royce that transform, instead of selling airplane engines, sells power by hour. Michelin doesn't sell tires anymore, sells pay per mile. Philips doesn't sell bulbs, sells light per year. And Xerox doesn't say photocopies machine, they're just photocopies. And the weather company like behavior. So when we consider these elements that we want to understand, and then we want to use our empathy and our confidence, we need to do a special work of questioning. There is this wonderful Harvard Business Review paper that talks about the art of asking questions. And this is about four levels of questions, from the basic to affirm what we know, which is very similar to the VUCA elements of discovering something new or going in from narrow to wide. So for example, the simplest option that we have is about clarifying what is a flower. But then we can elevate and go to a wider elements, and we apply this concept to something else. For example, what do flowers mean to men? But then we also can shift towards discovering something new. What is the role of flower in society in this funneling element, EFU? And the last one, the elevating on the top right, is about, is it really about flowers? Sometimes we have just to go back. It's not about our product. Maybe we have to transform it in a service. Being able now to understand is the best way to overcome uncertainty, elevating the level of confidence and elevating the empathy with the people we work with. Reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passions. At the end, we are not as rational as we believe. And even the Delphi oracle that was promoting to say, know thyself, in Greek, gnotis auton, is based on, again, this knowledge of ourselves, which is answering question, which now we can do it online, like in the test I just showed before of the Big Five, applymagicsauce.com, just as a reminder. What are the challenges? The challenges are that we are designed to be unaware. We have an unconscious system and a conscious system. While I'm talking to you, I have a heart beating, I have a skin sensoring, I have a blood cell reborning, I have a nervous system perceiving, and I'm concentrated, I'm following the slides, and I'm speaking in English, which is not my mother tongue. I'm not native English, I'm Italian. So while I'm talking to you, many more things are happening within my body and in your body while you're listening. So if we compare the unconscious level of the system is an amount of 11 million bits per second. What I'm doing instead consciously, which is presenting to you now, and I'm doing lightly, only requires 60 bits per second. And there is a very interesting book to explain this. So if you want to overcome this confidence, we need to work also with the other people. If we want to really have built a relationship with the others, we have to start being empathetic, and we have to ignore long-standing assumptions. We have to help people in feeling safe when they are in the meeting. We have to really stop ignoring inputs from people who are not affected by decisions, and always asking people who depends on us, and we always want to please us. And we should have to avoid on confirming the status quo. The elements of enabling dissent is a very interesting story. There is this guy who was a CEO of a famous company and invited a consultant to the meeting. And unfortunately, every time the CEO was talking, the consultant was raising the hand saying, no, sorry, this is nonsense. You cannot do that. You should do something else. And all the people in the room were really surprised of how assertive was this consultant. But he kept going and going and going. What was surprising was that the CEO didn't get angry. He was just taking notes and accepting the critics. When they left, the CEO told the consultant, Thank you, my neighbor. I'm really happy that you did as I asked today, to dress to like if you are going to a funeral, and to interrupt me as every time I was saying something, even if you didn't understand what I was talking about. Let's go for dinner now, as I promised you. We have to create this empathetic element, and we have to be aware of all the traps that there is. You don't know probably that even when you go to a restaurant and you ask for food, the body mass of the waiter will affect the amount of sugar and alcohol that you will consume. The bigger is the waiter, the more you will consume, because it seems that you feel less guilty. So we really need to understand and work very well on the confidence and the empathy. Empathy will help us develop the people who work with us. If I ask you to think who was the best boss in your life, probably you will all agree that was the person who helped you develop, who taught you something, who allowed you to learn. Look at this graph. Only 7% of our time is devoted to this. And then the other element, which is more about strategic innovation, is about 10%. But look, 54% dedicated to administrative control and task. How to do this? Technology is great. Technology can be terrible if you abuse of it. Have you ever heard about the FOMO? I'm sure, the fear of missing out. Try to start substituting with the JOMO, the joy of missing out. That's key to understand. That's key to develop empathy, and also that's key to develop a serious level of confidence. So by inquiring, by asking questions, you will practice these elements of confidence. You have to challenge the status quo constantly to keep understanding what is now uncertain. You have to create self-awareness in the people around you. You have to make people feeling safe, and keep listing this long-standing assumption of the FOMO to try to move to the JOMO. And now we go to the third element. We go to the C when we talk about this complexity. The complexity, we can solve it with clarity. So all this complex world, all these key factors that can make our decision very difficult, can be slowly overcome by an attitude of perseverance and humility. And here technology is important. We cannot talk about leadership anymore without technology. It's everywhere. Technology and big data, just to have you an idea, if we consider all the data that we have been exchanged in the world in 2016, and we put them in a CD, like data like email, picture, videos, we can put the distance between the moon and the earth made of CDs, or nearly 2 million kilometers of CDs. We have lots of elements when we have to consider all these characteristics, this humility. This is very, very important. We have to accept that things have changed, that data can know more than us, and especially the rules have changed, that privacy is something that we have to be really, really careful, and we cannot share whatever. We have multiple options to go and see how to overcome this clarity. And we can see Daniel Kahneman telling us something.
If you find yourself making a decision whether or not to do something, this may be a mistake. Whether or not means that you're considering only one action, and possibly you should be considering more.
So we have to consider many options, or many possible options. Artificial intelligence is giving us lots of things, and our emotional intelligence is very connected to it. When we consider the new jobs that have been created by artificial intelligence, we have the job of the trainer, is the person that's how help AI technology to complete tasks. For example, a trainer work now is to teach autonomous car how to drive in the street of Mumbai or in the street of Tokyo. They, as you can imagine, represent different challenges. And this person has to understand, has to teach the car what is the subtle behavior of pedestrian in different cultures. There is the explainer which is that what it makes is more technical, but is a way that requires a kind of ability to people who are like business leaders to explain them why AI is not working. And the sustainer, that is the person has to make how good is the performance of the AI applications, how humans are perceiving this performance in a good way. So there is lots of work about the human part, about this humility that helps us in overcoming. We have still lots of jobs that only humans can do. You can see from the blue up to the red. The blue is very, very AI driven, and red is very, very human driven. As you can see, still there are very 50-50. It's difficult to overcome, but this clarity to go and overcome all these elements that is difficult for us to now manage, and this complexity that we have, artificial intelligence can give us a hint. Up to a level like Amazon here is using this predictive analysis. Instead of deciding what to buy, choose, and then pay, Amazon will already ship you home and then you will buy, because they already know what will your taste. So from shop and ship, you will go to ship and shop. And this has to do also with autonomous car. The business model is changing completely. So this complexity of hotels, airlines, all this world, maybe will reach a different level, because maybe if we have an autonomous car, we don't need anymore to take a hotel in the night and the flight to go somewhere, because our autonomous car will drive to the place in the night and we'll wake up in the morning where we have to be. And that's our car. So there is our bed, there is our clothes. We don't even need a hotel room. So many things are changing. So how to overcome complexity is to get an alliance between humans and machines. Humans, we are still great at common sense, imagination, compassion, but machines are great at pattern identification, at locating knowledge. They have a 24/7 attention. So big data can help to improve your leadership skills, but you need to be humble. You must have humility, because the data know more than you. And only with the right combination between collective intelligence, like this book from my professor in MIT, Thomas Malone, we can see the right combination between still being very humans, but take advantage from the machine. The key is to persevere. If we want clarity, we cannot stop on the first in success. The first failure will, of course, be hard, but we can go on above that. So when analyzing big data and when you work in technology, please list more options than just one. Persevere. Just have the whole picture of what is happening really, and analyze all this information, and also look for something which disconfirms your hypothesis. Go with humility and keep an open mind, because that's always very, very important to go. And sometimes you just need to go for a walk, or you involve other people to see other elements. And the fourth last element is about the agility in ambiguity. The fourth element of ambiguity, which is when we don't really know what is the meaning of an event, we are working about, surprisingly, social and analytical elements. Why? Because we have to connect. When we don't have the meaning, we have to see what people understand as a meaning. If we cannot assign, the meaning very often is shared, and we have to see how people are assigning the meaning to something. We need to be multiple people at the same time. I hope you can see the metaphor here. This article from The Guardian was talking about why rock stars don't trash hotel rooms anymore. Why? Because now they cannot just live on the royalties of their records sales. They need to interact with the public. The only way to make money now is going to concerts, while it was before COVID. And not anymore about selling albums. The piracy in the digital music has changed completely the business, and so has to change the life of the rock stars. And now it's changed also our life. when we talk about this constant contact and distance, it could not be more active and current than now, where we have to maintain this social distancing. There's an interesting book called Loonshots. And there he talks about how we maintain people who have different elements together. For example, when you consider ice and water, if you want to have them together, of course you can mix, but not for too long, because if you put in a very cold place, the ice will become hard. But if you put in a hot place, the water will become hard, or the ice will melt. If you want to maintain the characteristics of different people, we have to mix them together, but also maintain them in their own environments. And a way to understand what is your own environment is this other psytoolkit.org, where you can do lots of tests, psychotests, to understand who you are and what is your real element. So when we have to consider this social and analytical ability of connecting and to be agile in this connection, we need to know who we are, we need to know who are the other. This is the only way to overcome ambiguity. And being a gardener knows how the plants are growing. You have to make people growing. So sometimes it's not about putting heavy weights on them, but let them very, very blooming in a very light way. So you must be agile also in this element, instead of creating more ambiguity. What's the way of doing this? Keep learning, learning and learning. You are only agile if you keep learning. If you are only agile physically, if you do sport, you will only be agile mentally if you keep learning. There are learning chances every single time. You can keep learning from your boss, from a disaster, from a terrible situation, from beautiful situation, from promotion, but also from being fired. The problem is that you have a limited space. So sometimes you have to unlearn. So if something is old, if something is obsolete, just forget about it. If something is toxic, like a relationship, like a job, just forget it and go back to learn new things. We have one of the highest risks in this society of functional illiteracy, or which is the incapability to understand complex texts despite adequate schooling. People can read and write, but don't understand even a tweet. People have the illusion of this, and they don't know what they are having. Do you remember where you were on the 9/11? Probably yes. Everyone probably would say yes. Of course, I remember where I was on the 9/11. This study, a study before this, was done when Kennedy was killed in Dallas. And they asked people, do you remember where you were, where Kennedy was killed? And they asked the same question to the same people 1 month after the happening, 1 year, 5 years, and 10 years after. You know what was surprising? Only 20% of the people were coherent in their memories. And the same happened on 9/11. What was different was that while if people couldn't remember other small events, other events were not flash bulbs, how they are defined, this kind of events like 9/11 or Kennedy shooting, they were convinced that they were remembering. So it was not about accuracy, but was about the belief of accuracy. And this happens a lot. Daniel Kahneman, which I already mentioned twice, and now I'm mentioning another time, called this Vysiati. Vysiati is what you see is all there is. He talks about the illusion of confidence. And there is another study very interesting about dancing that show how people easily get an illusion of confidence. And this is about showing people a dancing video once to a group, to another group, a different group that show the video twice, to a third different group 5 times, to a fourth different group that show the video 10 times, and lastly to a 50th different group that show the video 20 times. Then all the people from the 5 group are put together in front of some judges and they start dancing. Of course, the judges don't see any difference between the group 1 and group 5. But you know what's the difference? the difference is that group 5, who's seen the video 20 times, is very convinced that now they know how to dance. So when we think about these elements, we have to be really careful also who are our guidance. Simon Sinek is someone who is very famous in leadership now. Unfortunately, it's very confusing because he is showing that if you start with the why, you will get somewhere. Unfortunately, there is no proof of what Simon Sinek is doing. Actually, in the academic community to whom I belong, Simon Sinek is not considered at all, because actually they only say he's full of hot air. He doesn't do research and doesn't do anything. There are lots of myths into leadership, and we have to be really careful. Another myth is that, another hoax is that the brain can grow, and everyone uses the study of the taxi driver. And it's true that there is a temporary expansion of the posterior hippocampus, but it's temporary. It's not that the brain changed. And actually it's temporary because it's given up another element. The trade-off is that you remember something new, like the name of the street, but you forget something old. What really happens long-term is when you start playing something when you're a child, and then you have a real change in the brain structure. It's like the violin players, when they start very, very young, really they saw a change in the brain. But you cannot change your brain in an adult age. That's not what you expect. And starts with the why is something which is dangerous. We don't have the ability. Our brain is small. We don't understand. We don't understand the infinite. We don't understand infinite time, infinite space. What we can only do is start with the what. Daniel Goleman, the inventor of emotional intelligence, a professor from Harvard, he was the one who studied meditation. He studied a Vipassana. He was a Vipassana meditator. And he spent days and days in silence. And they only could find results on meditation by studying the extreme, by studying people who were meditating 3 years. But that was the understanding of the what, not of the why. So when we have to consider the last element of agility to overcome ambiguity, we need to count again on people, and we need to count again on analytical elements. So we have to mix the phase, we have to mix different people to see different results. We have to reward people, sometimes reward the minority because they have better ideas or new ideas. We have to be careful on the learning, organizing learning audits, and also create a culture where inquiry is valued. But stay with the what. Inquiry is good, but remember what is the what. Be analytical. What is happening here? And to conclude, the last slide in 5 steps. What are the takeaways? The latest McKinsey report say about these 5 horizons that can help us in this crisis. The one part, which is the resolve, to address the immediate challenge of the COVID. So you need to be analytical. You have to use these elements to see what are the elements to start. Then the resilience. You have to be really good at being empathetic with the people and humble. You need to use humility. The third element is about the return. You have to create how to return to the business, and probably you will do lots of mistakes. So keep persevering, because it won't be a one-time shot. And then once you are back, things will keep evolving. So adapt to the new market, adapt to the new customer, adapt to the new chances that people need, and be confident with it. To finish with, keep being social and communicative when you have to reform, when you have to see how regulatory and how this will become something long-term. So I hope you enjoy. I'm very happy to connect on LinkedIn, but only on one condition. I only connect with people I don't know if they post something interesting and they create debate. So I see your post and I will connect with you. I hope you enjoyed, and I'm ready for question and answers.
Thank you, Giulio. I think that was a fabulous, very refreshingly different way of being able to deliver a program, I must say, as compared to what we're used to here in India. So I thank you for having taken us through this. This was really interesting listening to you. I'm going to try and, I just want to make a point that we're almost at 5. We only have a couple of minutes to go. So need the permission of the audience to be able to extend this by perhaps 5 or 10 minutes, just to be able to interact with Giulio and not lose this opportunity to be able to ask him some questions. So with your permission, I'm going to go ahead to be able to ask you a few questions, Giulio. I'm just going to go back to be able to ask, how can we capture the moods, emotions, and sentiments of employees by using artificial intelligence, predictive analytics? So this is a question which somebody from the audience is asking. How can we capture moods, emotions, and sentiments of employees by using artificial intelligence to be able to give us predictive analytics?
So sometimes it's very, very simple to start capturing it. There is a device that is only show a smiling face and a sad face that some people are putting at the exit of their offices. And just by pushing all the thousands of employees every day, how they are in that day, and to understand that mood, and crossing with all the data like weather, sales reports, salary increase, firing, or whatever, then you can get all these kind of trends that and pattern recognition that help you to understand how people are working. You need to work, you need to establish a criteria and infrastructure to collect the data. It's not as easy.
Okay, great. There's a question here from Chetna Dikshit, and she's asking, how is volatility and uncertainty different from each other?
So volatility is the rate of change. So it's about the speed. And uncertainty is more about what I don't know about the present.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to see whether we have any other questions here.
There is a very important VUCA sometimes is not explained in a proper way.
Yes.
And this is a way that is a matrix actually.
Yes.
It's very important to establish how this metric works, because sometimes it's difficult to distinguish also between ambiguity and uncertainty, and that's something which also can be done in a positive way.
Right.
So this is the way to clarify.
All right. I'm going to ask you a question on behalf of Nathan Prakash, and he's asking, ultimately, if you start with what and not why, ultimately, are you not asking the why question when framing the vision?
Yeah, the problem is that it's an illusion to understand the why. Even if we keep asking the why, we don't understand the why. That is what the research is telling us. So very often we have the why because we have this illusion of knowledge, and we prefer to keep going on this illusion of knowledge. But instead, the what, which you can achieve, but takes a long time to understand what is happening, because you have to record constantly every moment of what is happening, and then to understand and make a pattern recognition on the what, sometimes is less sexy and appealing. I think that Simon Sinek only was successful because he offered the golden circle, which is a model which doesn't exist, it cannot be proved, but is very appealing. So that's why people are liking it.
Right. Apart from empathy, what other EQ competencies are required to deal with change?
So in all these elements that we are considering is about, there is a big discussion about if being analytical, it's a kind of EQ competence. But there is an element of like, I decide to stay with the what, to observe. It's a way of consider it as perseverance, but it's more focused on numbers, on the facts. So when we consider that I will stay and keep observing and being analytical, we try to see what is happening. This is still an EQ element. It's not just being empathetic. It's not just about feeling emotions. Sometimes it's about perceiving how the reality is happening, and being analytical is a way of perception.
Okay, great stuff. I have a question here, which is a very interesting question. It says, VUCA in developed economies, is it the same as VUCA in the developing world?
Yeah, so of course you have the intensity of the 4 elements, of course, can be disproportional, because the rate of change in US now is probably much faster because of technology, because there are things that are going faster, but then maybe it's bigger in a developed economy than in an underdeveloped economy. But of course, the level of ambiguity, the level of uncertainty can be really, really higher in an undeveloped economy. The four elements are there, but the proportions between them, it changes on undeveloped economy.
Right. So I'm going to ask you this question, which is how can we use empathy and EQ when the outcome of VUCA is it can be negative? For example, in the current COVID crisis, there's a huge job loss situation. So the question is, how do you express empathy and EQ in the face of a crisis which is causing even more human hardship and pain?
So when we consider, of course, empathy as a limited amount, and we cannot abuse of empathy too much, because otherwise we are consumed and we stop being empathetic. If you think about the doctors, of course, now it's very, very difficult. You have to compare also with confidence. So we cannot give magic formulas. It's not about one dimension here. Yeah. It's always at least bidimensional. So when we talk about empathy, you also have to talk about confidence at the same time. A doctor now cannot just feel sorry for every single person who is passing away for COVID, and has to take strong decision, especially when deciding when maybe giving a ventilator or respirator to another person and decide that one is going to die. This happened a lot in Italy, not just in an undeveloped country. It happened, unfortunately, here in Europe. So you have to compare empathy with confidence. That's why all these elements have to be coupled together, if not with a third variable.
Right. I have a question here from Jill Sheldekar, and she's asking, in the last few weeks, I have seen virtual meetings get more chaotic, and that after the meeting's over, there's a deep sense of anxiety and confusion that is felt by many. Do you have any practical suggestions on how to handle the anxiety that people are experiencing post-virtual meetings? Because this can easily create a barrier in terms of being able to connect or even to be able to be analytical during the discussions and the rest of that. So can you suggest or recommend anything in the context of the anxiety people are experiencing after more confusion and chaos coming out of virtual meetings?
What is important now is that when we talk about clarity, is also about delivering the situation. We cannot ignore that we are in a crisis, and the CEOs, governors, they have to give the bad news, and this is important. Then it's not just about the bad news. Then if a real leader must give the guidelines of how we are going to overcome the bad news, how we are going to overcome the crisis. This is very, very important now. And many people feel this anxiety because it's only about the bad news, and then everyone talks about the bad news, and we keep talking about the crisis, and we don't talk about anything else. So rule number one is we give the bad news, but then we also give the guidelines. And then it's again about perseverance. I don't succeed today in the guidelines, but I can succeed tomorrow. And the other element is about the time management. Time management is being a disaster. We keep doing meetings like if we are in the office. We can meeting and say, I heard just 2 days ago in a meeting, someone said, okay, I need to say something, but maybe I'm going to be long. Is this a problem? And no one said anything. Of course it's a problem. We don't have time. We cannot just dedicate meeting who can be 1 hour, so 2 hours and a half, and have 5, 6 in a day. Meetings, I've been talking with the big companies, more like US based, and they established that maximum half an hour. For long meeting, maximum 45 minutes. Here in Spain, 1 hour and a half, 2 hours meetings.
Right, good point. I'm going to ask you this question on behalf of Vikram Kalyanpur, and we'll take that as the last question. Can you give us an example that brings out the difference between FOMO versus JOMO?
So the FOMO is the fear of missing out. I'm constantly checking my telephone all the time, since I wake up in the morning and 1 minute before I fall asleep. I'm constantly aware. I'm talking to you, but then the telephone buzzes and I get distracted. Or I want to write a message to someone, I open the telephone, I open WhatsApp, and instead of writing the message, I read the WhatsApp who are there waiting for me, and I already forgot what I had to do. creates a sense of anxiety and alert, like when we were living in the woods in the past. So we were constantly afraid of someone was going to eat us, eat our children. This is the FOMO, is the fear of missing out. I'm constantly anxious. The JOMO is the joy of missing out. For example, the Vipassana retreat. In India, you have so many. When you do a Vipassana, you stay 10 days without telephone. So it's interesting if for the first 3 days, you keep feeling the telephone vibrating in your pocket, even if you don't have the telephone anymore. So that's the JOMO. The Vipassana is a way of doing JOMO, 10 days without telephone.
Nice point. We've got 2 small questions, if we can ask these quickly on behalf of everyone, which is Rajaram Thorve is asking, can decision-making about for selection of the right candidate for the right position be made using artificial intelligence? And I'll take another question jointly with that, which is, can critical thinking and problem solving skills be developed using artificial intelligence?
Yeah. So the first one, we can find trends. The first work is about the selection, the optimization work that artificial intelligence does. It can cluster the CVs in groups and can tell you what are the most interesting ones. But the final solution is the human. Only the human can find the subtleness. But the first screening can be done, and actually is being done by artificial intelligence, also at medical level. So you can decide which may be kind of cancer, what can be, but then it's the doctor who will decide what it really is. But the artificial intelligence can screen out what is not. And about critical thinking and problem solving, all these advanced elements, no, this is still a human being that is doing it.
Right. I think with that, we're going to try and bring this session to a closure. Giulio, it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be hosting you today. Thank you for that very outstanding, very refreshingly different style of being able to really bring forth so many outstanding ideas. We must have you back again another time. There are lots of questions here, but we'll have them sent off to you anyway. And for everyone who's been asking questions about being able to access the recorded version of this webinar, I want to assuage you that all our webinars are available in the recorded version. And, we will inform you as soon as these are ready to be uploaded. They typically take a couple of days, post which they are available on our site, but we will kind of make an announcement so you can access all of them that have happened through the last 5 weeks. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Giulio, one more time. Wonderful to have you on board. And I'm so glad this fructified and we did have a chance to be able to hear you. All who are still on the webinar, please take the effort to be able to quickly evaluate it. So evaluate this webinar for us, give us feedback on whether you enjoyed listening to Giulio today. And thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. Continue being part of the Learning and OD Roundtable. Register for the upcoming webinars, especially in the area of talent and leadership and change, which are all scheduled through the next week. Do join us for the Sundowner series. I recommend strongly that you come in on board on that. That's the first time we get a chance to get you on board with your families. And do reach out to the team to be able to figure about Zippy and about People Strong Performance Alt, so that we can help you with your work from home, productivity, and performance of your employees. So all the best, everyone. Those of you who would like to ask a question to our HR response team, reach out to the numbers we announced before, or just simply ask Prudel and Tessin to direct you. We are happy to be able to continue providing you very distinctive programs, learning opportunities, and services through the COVID-19 crisis. I'm hoping we're going to see the close of this shortly. So wishful thinking, but we'll all pray to be able to be safe in the interim, and hopefully on the other side to more exciting and interesting challenges. So with that, take care, everybody. Be safe. Thank you, Giulio.
Thank you so much. Thank you. My pleasure. Have a good afternoon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.